It turned out it was very easy for me to access my past life. And the first time we tried to do it, I went straight to my most traumatic death. I had one person who I only did one session with. And she called me like 2 years later and she said, that session totally changed my life. And that was one of those sessions where she saw these 6 different past lives and she saw the pattern and she saw how to resolve it.
Welcome to another episode of The Ineffable Mystic. Today's ineffable mystic is Ann Mei. She is a Ph.D. in psychology and a hypnotherapist. She specializes in healing trauma. So, Ann, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Well, I guess I ended up doing this work because I grew up experiencing a lot of childhood trauma myself, and my own healing journey along the way. I learned a lot, and now I love sharing what I've learned with other people and helping them.
So, what are the areas that you help your clients with? What do they come to you with normally?
It's a range of things. I think that people who've had trauma in the past show up in a lot of different ways with a lot of different issues. But then when you just dig down and you find the source of the issues, it's usually some kind of previous trauma. And then once you heal that, it becomes very easy to resolve the issues that they came in for. So it's really astonishing, but sometimes I find that 1, 2, 3 sessions, people who come in with pretty serious problems don't need to see me anymore, which I think is amazing because, traditional therapy goes on sometimes for years, from weeks, months, years. And so I think it's amazing that there are methods that work that quickly and easily. And also, I think they find that it's not very painful. Like it's the sessions, I always say, you're going to end this session feeling really good. Because with hypnotherapy, we can, put in all these wonderful suggestions and really go right to the core of what's bothering them and help them feel better right away. I mean, ultimately, to feel better in the long term, you need to make changes in your life usually, but I think it really puts them on that road really, really well, gets them
Yeah.
unstuck.
So, hypnotherapy really helps with trauma healing, right?
That's my belief. Yeah, that's what I think. That's my
Yeah.
experience. That's my experience.
Yeah, that's my experience as well with hypnotherapy. It's such a life-changing work.
Yeah, it really is. And, we both have had a lot of experience with past life. So sometimes when you go back, you're healing childhood trauma, but sometimes you're healing trauma from previous lifetimes. And
Yeah.
that makes a huge difference to people too.
So tell us a bit about yourself. Where were you before this? Were you always doing this? Were you always interested in this? And how did you come about practicing hypnotherapy?
Yeah, well, so I actually have always been interested in trying to understand people, trying to understand mental illness, trying to understand problems, because of the way I grew up. I grew up in Greenwich Village in New York, and my dad was an artist, and my mom was very abusive. My parents were divorced. My dad had bipolar. He was murdered when I was 16. There was a lot.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a lot to deal with. And I was always just interested in understanding. So I actually started out training as an actress. And what a lot of what appealed to me about acting was I felt like you get to understand about people and their behavior, and you study people and you kind of get to understand them from the inside. Lots of different kinds of people who are different from yourself. You get to, when you embody them, you kind of really learn about them. And so I loved doing that, but ultimately I decided it really wasn't for me, and I went back to school and I got my PhD in psychology. And I actually studied a lot. I ended up studying developmental psychology, doing research, teaching at universities. I really, really wanted to understand everything we knew. I had done a clinical psych program, for my PhD, but I felt like it didn't really prepare me enough to help people. I felt like there was still a lot I didn't understand. And I felt like there was a lot we didn't understand, and I wanted to contribute to the research. So it kind of all unfolded. And then when I was 50, I remarried. I had married when I was 30 and had a son. And then the marriage didn't last. And when I was 50, I remarried someone I had dated in high school who was a diplomat.
Mhm.
And so I had to give up my work. I was teaching at the University of Michigan, at that time. So I had to give that up. And then I went and lived with him overseas. And that relationship was a very karmic relationship. It brought a lot of stuff up, like it needed to happen. It brought up a lot of healing, but it was really hard. And being isolated overseas with no friends or work, or, it was a tough time. And so I ended up really delving into my self-healing. So when I had been in my 20s, I had done a Jungian therapy for 4 years, which really helped address my childhood trauma and kind of turn my life around in a lot of ways. And it was wonderful. But my therapist had said to me, there's a certain amount of this trauma you're just going to have to learn to live with. And when I got older, I started questioning that. And now I don't believe that's true at all. I don't think we have to live with the pain and constriction of trauma. Sometimes there's a lot of layers of the onion that have to keep on being worked on. And like in my case, I think sometimes there's different times in your life that are right for different kinds of healing. And I always tell my clients, they say, well, why am I back here having to deal with the same? I thought I healed this. I thought I took care of this. And I always say, it's not, you feel like you're going around in a circle and you're not getting anywhere. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
Yeah.
But in fact, what you're doing is you're traveling through a spiral. So you're coming back to that same issue, that same spot, but you're here now instead of down here, and you're experiencing it differently. You're doing a different layer of healing with it. And you really are working towards something that I think, we might want to call enlightenment, freedom, peace, real, true peace of mind and understanding is possible for us all, for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are special. I don't,
Yeah.
I think everybody has got access to everything that I experienced.
Yeah, it seems like life took you through so many different detours
Yeah,
to learn all these different things that will ultimately help you help all these other people with
yeah,
all the knowledge and experience. And that's so wonderful that you
yeah.
were able to take that and turn into something so beautiful. And I really liked your analogy of the spiral, going up the spiral. And I think I'm going to use that with my clients.
Yeah, I really believe it's true. I'm not just saying it to placate them. I really think
Yeah.
they're, and that certainly has been in my life. So when I started doing more healing, I started doing a lot of alternative kinds of healing methods. I don't know if you're familiar with the emotion code. Have you ever heard of?
No, no, I haven't heard.
Yeah, there's a book out called The Emotion Code that you can look at, and it uses self muscle testing, which not everybody really is ready to do or able to do. But if you can do self muscle testing, I think it's wonderful. And it uses magnets. So you run a
Mhm.
magnet over your brain while you are going to after you've identified the origin of the trauma that you're trying to heal. Or what he talks about, they talk about in the book is uh, unhealed emotions that get stuck in the body. And then you kind of ask, is there an unhealed emotion that's ready to be released and ready to be healed? And then you find out what it is, and then you do it with the magnets. And so I did a lot of work with that, and I loved it. And then I had an experience with hypnotherapy myself. And it was we were working on my issues with my husband, my then husband. And so we just asked to go to the origin of that. And I was myself when I was 2 years old. I was born in Japan, in Tokyo, and lived there till I was 2. And then my parents split up for a while my mom went back to the US and my dad stayed there. And so I was in my backyard. I was 2 years old. As soon as I saw where I was and who I was, I just burst into tears. I just couldn't believe it. It was like I was really there.
Mhm.
And so such a big leap forward in healing came from that session. The person who was doing it with me was very, very excellent, Mike Szynski. Um, and so then when my husband asked me for a divorce and I was trying to figure out, it was really interesting because it was actually when I got to a point of peace in the relationship where he always was wanting to fight with me and attacking me. And I got to a point where I mean, this was a lot of hard work, but I got to the point where I just would look at him and smile and think, oh, that's just so adorable. There he is doing that again. And I just wouldn't get caught up in it at all. I just look like, I love you, and whatever you need to do, that's okay. it was a kind of amazing to be there. But as soon as I got there, he wasn't interested in the relationship anymore, which I think is very interesting. So, so then I had to figure out what I was going to do because I had given up my academic position in order to be with him, and wasn't going to be possible to go back. So that was when I decided I wanted to train as a hypnotherapist because of that amazing experience I'd had. It was so healing, so transformative. It really got me rolling on a very, very big changes in my life and the way that I saw the world. So I moved to Sedona, Arizona, which is a place where a lot of people with similar beliefs and similar practices were there. I went and I trained at the same school that Mike had trained in, and had an amazing teacher, the best educational experience I've ever had, the best teacher I've ever had for my hypnotherapy. And I was able to have a little practice and be practicing it while I was training. I was trained for about a year and a half. So I was able to practice with everything, and it was just amazing. It was wonderful. But then I got interested in this material called the Way of Mastery. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
Okay, have you ever you've heard of A Course in Miracles?
Yes.
Okay, so A Course in Miracles is, supposed to be a channeled material that comes from the person we know as Jesus. So there's also A Course in Love, which is supposed to be the same, channeled through somebody else. And then there's a Way of Mastery, which is channeled through yet someone else. But it's all Jesus who's speaking. And for me, he says that there are many lineages in the world. Like there's lots, and I really believe this. There are lots of ways to get there.
Yeah.
And the lineage is sort of like maybe the group of people you've been moving with for thousands of years through reincarnation, so that things are going to resonate more easily with you. I think there are lots of teachers. He says he's one of many teachers on the other side who are guiding people. But if you come like me from this, it turned out I came from this lineage because I started seeing all these crazy past lives.
Yeah.
I had actually started seeing past lives when I was still married to my husband and starting my healing journey. And it actually came through my son, who was interested in it. And it turned out it was very easy for me to access my past life. And the first time we tried to do it, I went straight to my most traumatic death, which I don't think is super unusual for people.
No. Yeah, that's
And
very common because those lives who hold the most trauma and emotional charge, they will show up first because they want to be released.
exactly. And then you can clean up some of the smaller stuff later.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you got introduced to all of these modalities because it's the same way that I was introduced. So because I was trained in all the sciences like medical science, and I will call myself a scientist. I have published papers and I have gone through like
Yeah.
the complete scientific process. And because of the way that my brain has been trained, it was very difficult for me to accept that yes, this is real. Energies are real. You can work with energies. Past lives are real.
Yeah.
And once I had those experiences myself, so that's my nature. Like whenever I want to learn something, I would first want to go experience it myself and see if it's legitimate. And only when I find that yes, it is real, then I would go and learn it.
Yeah.
And it's been the same with Reiki, with past lives, with everything that I do today. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how people, get into these
Yeah.
after
Well,
their
I
own.
think I can relate to, I wanted to study science because I wanted to know everything we know, but I've kind of always been just wanting to know everything we know about everything. And I've always been very open to things. I feel like I can't evaluate things unless I'm open to them first. Like if
Yes.
you approach something with skepticism, I don't feel like you're really giving it a chance. And I'm usually able to discern things pretty clearly afterwards, but I kind of really just throw myself in with, wide open. So, and I think that's part of when I was looking back at why am I different from other academics and scientists this way, is I realized it was because I did my acting training first.
Hmm.
And the acting training taught me three things that I think are super valuable for everybody, to three important truths that I was able to experience as an actress. Let's see if I can remember all three on the spur of the moment. But one is that our minds are one, our minds are connected. Because when I would did a lot of acting classes, and in acting class, you do a performance and then your class gives you feedback, right? And I would notice that whatever I was thinking about that's what they would be talking about, whatever I had been thinking about when I was performing. So if I was self-conscious about how I looked, they would be talking about how I looked. But when I was really able to really focus on the character and what the character, like really stay in that moment of where the character was and what they were experiencing, um, then all they would talk about was the character. They would never talk about me or my acting. They would just get into like that character's situation and what they were experiencing. It was really interesting. So I know that our minds are really much more connected than, Western science would lead us to believe. Um, the other thing was that I was able to train in that kind of focus, you know? So getting that kind of mental discipline is very helpful for things like, because in order to act, in order to not be self-conscious when you're acting, because that's what happens is for amateurs, you get out on stage, all these people are looking at you. Your first impulse is just to totally look at yourself and feel self-conscious, right?
Yeah.
In order to not, but you can't act if you're doing that. So what you have to do is really focus on what the character is experiencing with like a laser focus. And so I think that was also very helpful for developing my um, ability to understand my thoughts, be connected to my thoughts, which I think is very helpful because one of the things I always work with my clients on, one of the two things I ask them to do right away is to just do what I call meditation, but it's really just taking the attention, your focus of attention from outside yourself to inside yourself, because you need to be aware of what you're saying to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just about quieting the mind. I don't even tell them to do that because the more you try and do that, the less you're going to be able to do it. Right. But you need to, you have to know what you're saying to yourself so that you can start getting some distance from it. It's driving you, but people are having this, what do I want to call monologue going on in their brain all the time. And most people just aren't even aware that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So they're saying all these old patterns, all these terrible things usually to themselves, right? All these negative thoughts are running through their minds. So you have to have that ability to look at it and then get some distance from it and realize that little, monkey mind, that little record playing is not you. That's not who you really are. And people just accept it as being the truth and it being them,
Yeah.
So it's,
I also feel like when you go into the arts of any kind, it helps you open up your spiritual side because you are so interconnected with your emotions and you are forced to go inwards when you're practicing any sorts of arts. So, yeah.
yeah. So then I went from that to the sciences. So I would always approach the sciences in a very different way, And I also had gotten very into Carl Jung before I went to graduate school. And he, as you know, is very spiritual.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
his.
yeah.
I'm
We did learn about him in the past life regression
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. Well, he's really important. He introduced the concept of the shadow that we all work with a lot now. Um, the concept of that we have male and female aspects to ourselves that need to come into balance and be embraced. And yeah, and also he is indirectly, he's the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous in a way.
Yes. Yeah.
But did you know the story?
No, I don't know the story.
So Alcoholics Anonymous is the only method that's been proven to be effective. So people are going to do better if they do it than if they don't do it. With any other particular method of doing therapy, it's the same as if you haven't done it. And with marital counseling, it's worse than if you hadn't done it. And the reason I think it is because it's the only method that says you have to have a spiritual foundation.
Yeah. And
Right?
it's so interesting that you mentioned your teachers. So
Yeah.
in your hypnotherapy school, and I'm sure your teachers in your acting school. So how has having a teacher or a mentor or a coach or somebody who was guiding you, how
Yeah.
has that helped you on your journey?
Well, honestly, I want to say that, I told you I kind of throw myself into things and then I evaluate. And in the end, I've always thought that my teachers fell short. Like I've always gone past my teachers. And I think everybody has to do that. You can't get stuck on you will be stuck if you think that here's somebody else who knows more and better than you do. And I think ultimately, and this is what I loved about Carl Jung too, is he thought, you basically know best yourself. Nobody can tell you something about yourself more than you
That's
can know.
true.
So yeah, even like for the Way of Mastery, I followed the person who channeled it. And it turns out like he just doesn't even seem to understand the material that he channeled. And it's wonderful material. I recommend it for everybody. And everybody's path is so unique and different that I think you really have to, you have to abandon all gurus if you're going to get there. And that's my goal when I work with people is I want to give you tools that you can use to continue your journey on your own. I do not want to make you dependent on me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You could do, and I know if you do these things, you will make changes in your life that will, for the better, that will make really big difference in your
Mhm.
life.
Yeah, and I feel it's more of a collaboration even with your teachers.
Yeah.
So you have some things and your teacher have some qualities. When you combine both of them, it can be wonderful for both. Like even the teacher is learning from the student
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Well, as a teacher myself, I can say I absolutely learn from other people
Mhm.
as well. I mean, the best teachers are the ones who take attitude of humility and generosity. And I would say Linda Bennett, who was my hypnotherapy teacher in Phoenix, really embodies those qualities.
Mhm.
Yeah, and she really wanted to just empower you to be able to do it. It was really beautiful. I think that's what makes a great teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, and to see your students or clients explore those abilities in themselves and then just run with it and probably be even more out there with it. It's so wonderful to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing. I had a client who came to me who had never done therapy before, was, just felt like she was just falling apart. She couldn't get through the session without just crying the whole time. And I'm not exaggerating. We had 3 sessions. And then I said, it seems like you're doing pretty good. I'm always available to people afterwards. I'm like, just call me anytime you feel like you can use me, but I don't want you to feel like you have to do it every week. If you're doing great, wait till something comes up and you need some help. Well, I talked to her a couple months later, and it turned out that a whole bunch, like her life shit had just hit the fan right after our last session. And I was like, how come you didn't call me? She said, I just did everything you told me to do, and it was fine. I was fine. She just sailed through these what would have been really, really challenging for her before. So I just felt like, wow,
Yeah,
that's, she was really good because she did everything I asked her to do. Most people don't. Most people, they just, change is a little bit harder for them. And so it takes a few repetitions before they get it. But she was just like, I'm going to do it. And boom, it was amazing.
I don't think life stops throwing like all those curve balls at you. Like it will always happen. There will always be ups and downs.
Yeah.
But what matters is how much do we learn from them and how many skills do we gather to be able to deal with it in a good way,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I think that's exactly right. Exactly. Exactly. It's not like life gets wonderful and easy and perfect and everything falls into place. I mean, I think that's one of those misunderstandings of the law of attraction, you
Yeah,
know? It's like it's a little more complicated than that. And we don't really know, this comes from that Way of Mastery stuff too, but you know, we can't see the big picture.
yeah,
We don't know. There's so many different factors going on. And that's where faith and trust comes in. And what I always say is when you give that faith, that even when things don't seem to be going the way your little self wants them to be going, you know, it doesn't mean that it's not perfect for you. And when you
Mhm.
give that faith and that breathing space for spirit to work in your life, then these miracles start showing up in your life.
Yeah, this is so interesting that you said because just yesterday I shared a story on my Instagram. I was watching a person who is a tantric, so he is a very well-known tantric in India, and I was watching his YouTube, and he mentioned this that you have to be a vessel for the higher beings, to work through you. And if you think that you are worshiping a deity, that's not happening. The deity is wanting to work through you. That's why they
Yeah.
are making you worship them. So
Yeah.
it's like we are just instruments, and we are just here to do the work that they have asked us to do. And it's not the other way around.
That's a great way of thinking about it. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's exactly right. And that way, and you know, it just makes life so much better too when you can have that approach, you know.
Yeah. And
And
there's
when
more of a surrender when you do
yeah, the surrender to what is.
that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then all kinds of stuff happens, but the way I think about it is you're opening up your vessel for love to flow through you, for you to be the vehicle of love. So no matter what's happening in your life, ultimately that's what we all want, right?
Yes.
If you looked at your hierarchy of what you want in your life, ultimately it's always going to boil down to you want love and you want connection with the divine, which I think is kind of the same thing.
Yeah. And
And
this reminds me of the book by Dr. Brian Weiss that's titled Only Love is Real, because from all of his past life regression sessions, there was just one message that only love is real.
well, that's exactly what Yeshua says in the Way of Mastery.
Yeah.
Only love is real. Exactly. If you wanted to boil it all down to it, that's the only thing that's real. So, but when you allow yourself to be that vessel, then you're always getting to experience it. Whatever's happening appears to be happening in your outer world, right? You can always have that choice to allow the love to flow through you, and you get to experience the love no matter what anybody's doing. Like when I was with my husband and he, was wanting to fight with me, and I was just experiencing how much love I had for him. It's just, you're receiving the love and it's just flowing out through you.
Mm.
And it feels good. That feels really wonderful.
Yeah.
What the outer circumstances. And then when he asked me for a divorce, I realized, you know, I can still love him. I don't have to stop loving him. Even we're
Mm.
not physically together, we're not in communication, but I can still love him,
Yeah,
you know?
that's such a profound realization. And I feel like love is the greatest dissolver of karma, right?
Yes. Yes. Love and forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's my goal for personal goal for my life is release all karmic ties, heal all karmic wounds and
Yeah. I don't
release.
want to be here again.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm good. And it just, I don't need to hold on to that. And when you do the past lives, I mean, I've seen this in my clients, I've seen this in myself, the patterns that we repeat over and over and over and over again without learning from them. So
Yeah.
frustrating. And I just I'm going to learn it this time. I'm learning it while I'm embodied. And that's really what's the challenge, because when we're in this state, it's very dense and this other stuff feels really, really real. Um, so I had this experience. We were talking about, what it feels like to be on this planet and to be embodied versus this idea that only love is real. So I was, really experiencing that, moving into that space. And I was on this beautiful beach on Lake Michigan, and it was like a beautiful, beautiful day. And I was sitting there in the sun in my comfy chair, and I just thought, well, if only love is real, then why would we ever create things that are not of love?
Yeah.
Right? It was just a really genuine, wondering question, like, why are we doing this? And I swear I heard this voice that it was not me, but it
Mm.
was very, very clear. Like it was such an open-hearted, wondering, genuine question. And this voice just came in and said, in order to know love more fully.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? So I
Yeah.
always think about that, like when we're not in our bodies, I think all we can experience is love and bliss. Like we just see, there's no veil. We just see the absolute truth, and we're only experiencing love. But in order to grow as a soul, we need to experience that contrast. And this is not my original idea. Abraham Hicks says a similar thing about how we're here to experience contrast. There's this guy, Christian Sunderberg. Do you know him?
No.
Okay, I saw a video of he's on online and
Mhm.
got some videos and things, but I'm pretty sure I've said this before, and I hope that I'm not misremembering the person and the experience. But there's a video on YouTube where he talks about how he remembers his, being in between lives. And he said he was, in that space, and he came across this being that was just so beautiful and glowing and full of love, more magnificent than any being he'd ever met before. And he said, and I think about this story a lot. And he said to them, like, dude, how did you get to be like this? And he was like, well, I did this thing. I got embodied and went to Earth, and it just absolutely transformed me.
Mm.
So he said he decided he wanted to do that too. And so he was being born. It was in the process. He was actually in the birth canal. And he started feeling and experiencing the density of being embodied and the density of being in this planet. And he was like, oh, I can't do it. And he just
Yeah.
passed, and the baby died.
Mm.
And then he saw how sad it made the mother, and he felt really bad. So he's like, okay, I'm going to try it again. And this time I'm really going to go through with it. And that's pretty much the story. But I think it's, there may be a lot of truth to that I think when I tell my clients is you're doing high altitude training. So when you're a runner and you run in high altitude, then it's much more difficult. So you don't have as much oxygen.
Yeah.
But when you're back at your regular level, you have made gains in your training. You're actually a much better runner than you were before. So
Yeah.
that's the way I think about it. It's like, if we can remember the truth and experience the truth while we're here in this density, then we get to grow as souls and experience our love. Like, now we really know what this love is. Now we really appreciate it. Now we really understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
More than if it was just all you've ever experienced and you don't know any different.
Yeah. So before you mentioned contrast, I was also thinking about the word contrast because of all of these different darkness that is thrown into our lives, only so that we can then appreciate the light. Because if all there is that exists is light, then we won't be able to appreciate it, you know? You
Yeah.
can't see light against light.
But and even more deeply, it's this opportunity to remember the truth even in the hardest times.
Yes.
So if you're just experiencing bliss and everybody's loving you and everything's beautiful and wonderful, you're walking around. But if you, when the real tests come, when the hardships come, and you can remember only love is real and God is what, or whatever you think of, if the word God is, triggering or whatever, you can just substitute the word love. But
Yeah.
that love is always available to you. And if you can feel it even in the most difficult times, in the saddest times, and I don't mean to not feel the sadness or not feel the negative emotions, because that's something I work with people a lot.
Mm.
That's we call spiritual bypassing, where you don't want to
Yes.
feel the negative emotions. And that's that's probably the biggest problem that folks have that I work with them on. Besides the negative self-talk is the inability to allow yourself to have the three biggies are sadness, fear, and anger.
Mm.
And we're all trained that we're not supposed to have those, and they're bad, and we try not to have them. That's not the way emotions work. Emotions are just like water that flows through if you let it flow through you. And this is Carl Jung again. Carl Jung said that if when you don't let yourself feel emotions, they become trapped in your body, they become out of control, and they do damage. And
Yes.
that's what trapped emotions are, that the emotion code's trying to release. I work with them to understand that it's okay to have those feelings, even though you were trained not to. And part of the reason that people around you always told you not to have them is because they're contagious. So what you're feeling, they're going to feel, and they don't like to feel them. They don't know how to feel them. They're not comfortable with them. The only thing they know is to tell themselves not to have them, to tell you not to have them when you're growing up. Um, but if you can become comfortable with your own negative emotions, then you can be there for other people when they're having them too. You can hold that space for them. It's a really beautiful thing. And it's surprisingly easy once you let
Mm.
yourself start doing it. My theory of depression is that it's sadness you're not letting yourself feel, that you've never let yourself feel. And my theory of anxiety is that it's fear you're not letting yourself feel. It's not
Mm.
the fear, it's the resistance to the fear. That's the problem. And the same thing with sadness. And then anger, obviously. I think when people have anger problems and issues with how they express their anger, it's because it's been repressed and then it's bursting out in these uncontrollable, destructive ways. So
There's so many beautiful nuggets in that conversation. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So are there any client stories that you can share that will help people know the importance of the work that you do?
I'll tell you that I've had several clients who come in with an issue and they've ended up, and I don't set out to do past life regressions. We just go to the origin of the issue, but often that ends up being in past life. And that was certainly true for myself when I started doing the emotion code. The biggest one that I had turned out to be from a past life, the biggest emotional wound that I had to heal. But what's so interesting is I've had a few clients who have had this problem and then they've gone back and they've seen 3 lives where they had the same problem, but it was much worse. So kind of, they really saw the dynamics of the problem. And then they saw 3 lives where they had the problem and they solved it, they resolved it in the lifetime. Like usually they don't see the issue until they're dying in the past life. Then they realize, oh, I was silly to be like that this whole time. Um, but then they saw lives where they had resolved it. And I had I had one person who I only did one session with, and she called me like 2 years later, and she said, that session totally changed my life. And it was one of these. She said, ever since then, my life's been completely different, and it's been really great.
Mm.
So that was amazing. And that was one of those sessions where she saw these 6 different past lives and she saw the pattern and she saw how to resolve it. And then I had this other gentleman, the same thing happened with him. We did a few more sessions. We had done a few more sessions, but he came to me. He was older. I guess he was in his 60s, but he was suicidal. He didn't want to work anymore. He didn't want to have relationships. He didn't want to be alive anymore. He just didn't see any point to being alive. And he had that same experience where he went and had 3 lives where he saw the issue and 3 lives where he saw the solution. And then he'd gone home. He was just a very advanced soul also, but he went home and he had this sort of active imagination, vision, dream, whatever, that kind of really tied it all together. And then he was great. He was back to work. He was working as a Chinese medicinal practitioner, and he was back to work. He started a new relationship. He moved after a couple of years, but he always stayed in touch. But he just been doing great. And that was only really just a handful of sessions.
Yeah.
So I just think it's amazing that people can go from, I mean, usually if someone's suicidal and depressed and, or dealing with severe anxiety or really stuck in their lives, they would normally expect to need a lot of therapy sessions.
Mm.
And maybe even then not get better. I feel like traditional therapy, you talk about the problem and now you intellectually understand the problem, but you haven't done anything to change it. We had one session and he was really upset and he had just done 2 months of therapy. And he said, I just give up. It's not helping me. And I feel like I just need to go on medication. And we did one session and now he's like doing great.
Yeah, and I have had those clients as well who are referred by a psychologist,
Yeah.
and the same happens with my colleagues as well. Like so many of their clients get referred because they see the benefit in this, especially for someone who is at that point of life where they just don't want to continue and therapy isn't helping them.
Right.
So,
Right. Just talking about it isn't going to do it.
mhm.
And what I love about it too is it's coming from them. It's like not like me telling you what you have to
Yeah,
do or what's right or what's wrong or what's real or not real.
yeah,
It's your own soul talking to you directly. And one of the tools that I love to use with people who can do it, and a lot of people can do this, is we talk to, I don't know if you ever do this, but we'll talk to the oversoul or the true
yeah,
self
yeah.
and get advice.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Oh, I love that so much. And sometimes going to the planning session for this lifetime. Do you do that?
No, I haven't, but I want to do that in some client. That's
Yeah.
definitely one thing that I want to get into. But yeah, these are very common people who talk to white light and they get all
Yeah.
their answers.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And yeah, they always come out of it and say, that was exactly what I needed to hear. And
yeah,
I haven't said anything to them.
yeah. And they also feel this unconditional love and acceptance coming from the white light. which is again the fabric of the universe. But they, when they actually feel it firsthand, and they see that they're not just this human walking on earth, they are something bigger, I think that itself is life changing.
Yeah, that's what I want to say about the past life too, is yeah, exactly. Is seeing, well, you see that death isn't real.
Yeah.
So the fear of death and feeling like this is this one lifetime, you have to get it right. It's like, you've been doing this for, you can keep doing this forever if you want to, you know?
Yeah.
But but yeah, you see that you are more than this body, you are more than this life, and you get to experience your true self when you're leaving, you know, especially when you're healing those traumatic deaths and you're leaving and you're just, as soon as you leave the body, it's like immediately you just see, oh my goodness, why did I think that was such a big deal?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a little harder than that. Like takes a couple. My most traumatic death had been being burned at the stake as a witch.
Mm.
And I could feel myself being asphyxiated the first time I went in, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was doing it all wrong. And that's why it's so great to have a guide who knows what they're doing. It's really a better way to do it. But after several journeys back to that lifetime, I was able to heal that. And my ex-husband was actually the person who accused me, but he was also the father of my illegitimate child.
Mm.
So that was, talk about a complicated relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I was able to go back and heal and forgive that, you know, it's kind of amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, but then you see, yeah, you just feel that forgiveness and you're like, oh, it's okay. I guess part of the reason, way I think about it now is it's almost like back to my acting training. It's almost like what we're doing here is what actors do when they're in a
Yeah,
movie.
I was
Stage.
gonna mention that. It's so amazing that when you are an actor, you get to relate to that, because this is just a stage and we are all just actors who have a contract and we are going to fulfill that. And when we go backstage, we are all like buddies once again.
Exactly, exactly. And we all, you know, agreed to do this together for each other to play these roles.
Yeah.
And we wanted to have drama,
Yes.
right? You don't have a play or movie without conflict and drama and, you know, all
Absolutely.
just everybody loving each other and being wonderful all the time. That would be a pretty boring movie. No one would go see it.
Definitely.
But yeah, and then we're all buddies, you know, it was all just you were playing your role that you agreed to do for this lifetime. And that's how that realization was how I was able to come to forgiving my mother,
Mm.
what she had done to me. I realized, you know, she was doing a really good job of what I was supposed to be doing, you know.
Yeah.
And part of what was so great about what she did was it made me very self-critical, and it really did keep me from developing a very big ego.
Mm.
I was always very hard on myself, which was very painful, but in a way, it kind of helped with my being open to things and trying to improve myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think both truths can exist at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
yes, these are the traumas that we are experiencing right now, and they are very real, but also there is this background of love, and it's a kind of a collaboration between you and the other person. So, you having that awareness, what can you do to actually learn the lesson and then move ahead, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's also that when you're working with clients, you have there's that same duality going on because
Yes,
you it's very, you have to respect the pain that they've been through, what they've been experiencing.
yes,
It is real. And at the same time, you are holding that space of knowing that it's all really okay too. From my experience, the pain that we've gone through is part of what enables us to grow and understand and have all the, and we gain gifts from the suffering and from the pain. And I
yeah.
don't think, I think that pain and suffering is never for nothing. And the older, you know, some people can learn this faster, but the more experiences of that you've had, you look back and you see, you get that evidence. You
Mm.
wouldn't go back and change it because you wouldn't be who you are.
Yes, yes.
So you don't throw that right at somebody who's in pain and suffering. The empathy and being there with them in those feelings has got to be the first stage. But then as they start to allow themselves to feel it and they heal it, then there's space for that moving in of understanding the greater truth that
Mm.
that really we're all just being held in a loving embrace, and we don't need to worry about these things, you know?
Yeah. So
So
if people want to work with you
yeah,
in hypnotherapy or psychotherapy, how can they contact you?
yeah. Well, my website is annmeisedona.com, and May is MEI,
Mhm.
and no E, May, MEI, at sedona.com. And my email is ann@annmeisedona.com.
Okay, so I'll put all that information in the description.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here today. So many wonderful nuggets of wisdom were channeled today. And I
Yeah,
really loved our conversation, and
I
I'm
did
looking
too.
forward to, yeah, having another one probably soon.
Oh, great. I'd love to. And yeah, if this conversation generates questions and things that people would like us to go into more depth, I'd love it. And it's so wonderful to talk to someone with such similar experiences and like-mindedness. And it's so interesting how when you get closer to the truth, it's all just the same.
Yeah,
Whatever
it's
path
all the
you
same.
take to get to it, you get to the same answers, same
Yeah,
conclusion. Yeah.
yeah. So hope this helps our audience find that message that they are looking for, that they need in the moment. And I will see you next time in another episode. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Rio. You're wonderful. It's great.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.